Welcome back to another conversation on the All About You podcast. Now, I'm sure we are all having daily conversations about AI. Some people love it, some people hate it. And one thing I thought I would do, as probably most of you know, my husband has a podcast all about stamps. And we had a conversation the other day about, does he find using AI useful in the world of stamping? So I thought, okay, let's do a podcast about it. So Pete, welcome back to the All About You podcast.
Hello there, thank you for having me again.
So what I really want to cover is, for people that really are not aware of the world of stamping, a lot of time with stamps is doing the research. Now, my understanding, and please correct me, is you're using catalogues, for example, someone like Stanley Gibbons, that will give you an image of the stamp and a lot of information. So you are physically having to buy that catalogue, which are very expensive, and do your own research on it. That's the traditional way, am I right?
Yeah, that is correct. Just to put a bit of background into it, I've been collecting stamps for over 60 years, since I was a small child, and up until a year ago, probably, it never occurred to me that AI would be useful, because I've got so used to using the catalogues I already own. And to a certain extent, the internet, there are some good catalogues on the internet now, but most of the time I've got the experience to get by. But I joined a few Facebook groups, and it soon became aware that there's a lot of people out there that inherit or come across a stamp collection and have absolutely no idea where to start. So that's where AI could become useful, but there are some overriders in there that means it's not actually the perfect answer yet.
Because I think it's very interesting what you say. When people find out you collect stamps, their first response is, I've got a shoebox, I've got a suitcase, I've got a carrier bag in the garage, in the loft, wherever. I'm sure they're worth a lot of money because they were from my grandfather, my father, etc., etc. But it's one of those things, and I have seen how much time you are spending over the years and on a day-to-day on stamping, and research is the biggest thing. I mean, yes, you're always looking for the £1 million stamp, but can we now talk about, okay, some of the successes, some of the fails with AI, and just really get an idea of existing people who are collecting stamps, or whether those people who have got stamps in a shoebox can go, okay, let me see what I can find out using AI and how they go about that.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem that we as serious stamp collectors have to overcome is the expectation of many people. They inherit a large stamp collection, for example, and expect it to be worth a lot of money. And sadly, in most cases, people collected stamps just off envelopes. In the 60s and 70s, certainly, everybody saved envelopes, and you took the stamp off the envelope, you stuck it in your collection. Those stamps are still worth nothing now. In some cases, you've got stamps over 100 years old. People expect them automatically to be worth a lot of money, and unfortunately, they're not.
So my understanding then, from what you've just said, the age of a stamp does not necessarily make it valuable. That's the first thing. My very, very limited knowledge that I have picked up from you, with you collecting stamps, is what makes a stamp valuable is how many were produced, and probably more importantly, and again, please correct me, the errors on stamps when they were printed.
Well, yes, that's a whole different area. Errors on stamps make a huge difference to the value of the stamp, and generally those are what collectors like to collect, so they're worth a lot more money.
So if it's not the age of the stamp, number two is the errors on a stamp when it was printed. Is there anything else that makes a stamp valuable, from the fact that only 6 were produced in the world?
The one thing we haven't mentioned yet is condition. Condition is paramount. Doesn't matter whether it's one of 100 stamps left in the world. If it's torn, tattered, battered, it's not really going to be worth a lot of money.
And that's one of the things, isn't it? If we're talking about the age of a stamp, depending on how that stamp has been preserved or whether it's just been left on an envelope, that is going to deteriorate over the years.
Yeah, yes, exactly. One of the things people don't realise is that stamp collecting became a hobby within 10 years of the first stamp being produced. So people have been collecting stamps for over 150 years now. So there are stamps out there that have been in a stamp album and cherished for 150 years. But there are also stamps out there that have been through the mail, they've been in somebody's bottom drawer for the last 50 years and a complete mess. So the difference between those two stamps, they can be identical stamps, but the value of those two stamps can be huge.
Okay, so we've now sort of looked at what makes a stamp valuable and the different areas. Let's talk then. If you have a stamp, you've physically got the stamp in your hand, you've also got the catalogue, the official catalogue that you have paid for with all the information, and then let's look at what part AI would play in that.
So before computers were around, when I first started collecting stamps, you would look at the stamp. All stamps have the name of the country on them somewhere, apart from Great Britain stamps. Great Britain being the first country to produce stamps were given a special license, if you like, to not put Great Britain on their stamps. Every other country has their name on the stamp. However, it could be written in Chinese, it could be written in Indian. So sometimes they're symbols, but with experience you get to recognise the symbols and you get to recognise the country. The first step in identifying a stamp is to find what country it's from. Then it gets a little bit more tricky, but once again, with experience, old stamps have a certain style compared with new stamps. New stamps look like pictures. They're something that you would print off your own printer, rather than old stamps were engraved and then went through a printing press and a transfer, and they're generally, a lot of them are what are called line engraved, so the picture is made up of lots of lines. So you can tell an old stamp from a new stamp. And once you've got the country, you go to your Stanley Gibbons catalogue or Scott's catalogue, whichever one you use. You look down that country until you find your stamp. It's a long process. So the advantage of AI is it processes things much, much quicker than we can.
When you're saying AI, so you are taking that stamp, making a scan of it on your printer, getting it up on your computer screen, and then enlarging that as big as you want to have a real good look
at it. Yeah, yes. I mean, you can take a picture with your camera or with your phone and do the same thing. But yes, there's two facets to AI in my view. One is not strictly AI, but there are a lot of apps, phone apps, that purport to be able to identify stamps and give you a value for those stamps. My experience of using them they are completely useless. I tried. I did an experiment. I tried it with 7 or 8 different stamps that were a little bit tricky, but not that tricky. And the results were a mess, to be frank. A couple of them couldn't even recognise a penny red, which is, in fact, it's the most printed stamp ever in the world. Something like 21 billion of them were printed. And if it can't recognise that, then it's a bit worrying.
Because my understanding of AI is it's a bit like Wikipedia. People are putting information on, in theory, the internet. And let's say with Wikipedia, anybody can go in and update that information, but that information is not necessarily correct. Let's say on Wikipedia you've got a particular person, and when they die somebody will update it with their date of death, but then they've got the wrong date. So we'll go in, research this person, and it's got the wrong date. We think that's correct because it's on the internet. With AI, if we, for example, have got 10 people that have put information about one particular stamp, 8 of those people have got the correct information, 2 people have put the incorrect, so you've got an 80% chance of getting the right information about that stamp.
That's
but it's
correct,
not 100%.
Yeah. And that is the problem with AI. I mean, originally I talked about apps. AI is different. AI is things like ChatGPT and Copilot and those, and they are generally much better than the phone apps, and they do a pretty good job in my experience. But the one place that lets them down is the valuations, because what they do, as you rightly said, is to just collate all the information they've got off the internet and come up with a figure for a valuation. Now, there are people out there that are putting stamps on eBay for sale for several £1,000s when the stamp is worth threepence. But AI doesn't know that that's a scam. So AI looks at it and thinks, oh, that's a £3,000 stamp. So they will tell you that this stamp is worth £3,000. You get all excited, and then you take it to a dealer to sell it. The dealer says, I don't even want this stamp. It's not worth anything.
So if we go back to the catalogue, and you mentioned Scott's and Stanley Gibbons, these are produced by stamp collectors, professionals who know what they're doing. Information in theory is 99.9% correct.
They're actually produced by companies who are in the business to sell stamps. So the Stanley Gibbons catalogue, the Scott's catalogue, and all the stamp catalogues, if you're going to buy a car, they're kind of like the new car price list. So what they're saying is, if you want this stamp, this is how much we would sell you one for, in absolutely perfect condition. Other people may sell it, the same stamp, in slightly less condition for cheaper. If you're selling the stamp, you imagine it's like you selling a car privately. Nobody's going to pay you dealer prices for that stamp. So a rule of thumb is generally that if you have a stamp, if you want to sell a stamp, it's probably going to fetch about 20% of the actual catalogue value.
Right, so you are talking about the price, and what I was going to say, although they've given you the price, they have given you 99% accurate information, I should say, about that stamp. We can trust the information to be 99%
if
correct.
Not 100%. Both, certainly Stanley Gibbons, and I'm pretty sure Scott do as well, will guarantee that if the stamp they sell you is not what they said it was going to be, they will give you a full refund.
So using these catalogues then, almost 100% correct for the actual information about the stamp, the colour, the origin, etc., etc. But then it's something a little bit different in respect of the price, as you say.
That's it. And the other thing is, they will guarantee their stamp is that particular one. But that doesn't mean to say if you've got one in your hand and you think, oh, it's that one and that matches up to that exactly, they're not going to guarantee your stamp, because you might have missed something and got something wrong. And there are so many subtle differences, especially with the older stamps, that it takes a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge to get it perfectly right every time.
So if we go back to the catalogue versus AI, to buy a stamp catalogue, what's the average price, and do they get updated once a year or every couple of years?
They generally get updated every year, but it does depend on the catalogue. And this is where it gets complicated, because the standard catalogue will show you the cheapest version of that particular stamp. But there are stamps, particularly older stamps, where they had different watermarks, for example, or slightly different colours, something slightly different from a different variation of the original. And sometimes there's two variations of the same stamp. One will be worth hundreds of pounds, the other one will be worth £2 or £3. That won't be in the basic catalogue. You then have to buy a specialist catalogue to get the more detailed information. Basic catalogue, and it comes in 6 volumes for Stanley Gibbons, I think it's 12 volumes for Scott, is about £300. Scott's is about $700. So that's a huge investment. If you've inherited a stamp collection, I would suggest that $700 probably exceeds the value of the stamp collection, unless you've got a really good one.
And then AI, in theory, is free.
And AI is free. There is a stamp catalogue online that gives you the basic information of every stamp ever printed that is free.
And is that from a reputable source?
Yeah, it's a very good source of information. They also have a picture of every single stamp as well. So It's called Stamp World, and it's an excellent resource for looking up stamps. The one drawback is it takes time because, as I said, you've got to look at the stamp to decide which country it's from. So then you go to that country. Then you've got to decide what year it's from. And if they've produced thousands of stamps over the last 200 years, you could end up searching through loads and loads of things to find it. Whereas AI, if it doesn't get it 100% right, what I would recommend is using AI and then check what AI says to make sure it's the one you think it is.
So in theory, scan your stamp, whack it through AI, and then once you've had a good look at it, then go on to this stamp
Then go
world.
on to the catalogue and confirm what you think it's worth, what you think it is. But as far as value goes, again, Stamp World could give you a good idea. AI can give you a good idea. A dealer can give you a good idea. But until that dealer has actually seen the physical stamp, you're not going to get a true valuation. Because there could be things on the back, there could be all sorts of things wrong with it that don't show up in a picture.
I've just done a 2-part special about decluttering. And the first part was just decluttering your clothes, your books, your kitchen drawers. The second part, which I call the tricky part, was dealing with family heirlooms, the gifts, the jewellery you've inherited, the birthday cards, things that people who are no longer with us have given you. And I always say that's the tricky part of decluttering. Now, I would put stamps because we have so many conversations with people and said, oh yes, I've got my father's collection or my collection when I was a boy or my grandfather. And yes, they can be in a shoebox, they can be in a beautiful leather-bound stamp album. But this is tricky because, yes, you may have that £1 million stamp, or you may have that the stamp album is actually worth more than the whole of the contents. But it's a lot of work. For somebody, I mean, you've been doing this for a long, long time. You've built up a lot of knowledge, but you've done that over time. And you have spent hours and hours and hours doing your research and building your knowledge. For the average person that knows at some point they've got to open that shoebox and make a decision.
And this is the other problem is we've talked about valuing an individual stamp. If you inherit a collection that's got, say, 1,000 different stamps and value each one, then try and add it up, it's just probably not worth your time and effort. And if you took it to a dealer, what a dealer does is have a general look and a feel of what the collection is worth. And things like, are the stamps in some sort of order and nicely presented, or are they just quite randomly stuck in an album? If they're randomly stuck in an album, the chances are there's not going to be anything hugely valuable there. If it's nice and neatly laid out, with handwritten notes beside it, with obvious sets all together in some sort of order, then that's the one that's a dealer's going to look at and think, yeah, I'll have another look at this.
See, while you were saying that, I was relating to women. A lot of women just throw their shoes in the bottom of the wardrobe. But if they do own a fancy pair of shoes, you can bet your sweet life that's in the box with the tissue paper, lovingly looked after, but the everyday shoes are just racked by the front door or in the bottom of the wardrobe.
Yeah, it's probably much the same with stamp collections. Yeah, if it's been well presented, well looked after and organised, chances are it's going to be worth something. Having said that, we had a friend who inherited a collection and wanted me to have a look at it. In a random envelope was the really valuable stuff, and it wasn't in an album. So it does happen that they end up in not necessarily the nicest of places, but it's
You've just put
unusual.
the fear of God in everyone now, that in that shoebox or that carrier bag in the attic
Well, that's what
is that £1 million stamp.
That's what I would say. Whatever you do, if you don't just throw it away. If you're decluttering the stamps, don't throw them away. Someone will have some pleasure, even if the collection is worth £20 or less. Someone's going to get some pleasure out of stamps because there's still an awful lot of stamp collectors out there.
Well, that's good to hear. Let's just sum up then. The choices are let's say you're going to be very brave, put your big girl, big boy pants on, and you're going to get that shoebox out. The first thing, if you can, is, I mean, I'm at a loss now. I mean, imagine opening that shoebox going, okay, lots of lovely pretty colours, some are curled up, some are in little cellophane packets. Where would the average person start?
What I would suggest, and I mentioned this on the video I did recently, what I would suggest is look for the older stamps. I know we said old stamps don't necessarily mean they're valuable, but older stamps are more likely to be valuable than newer stamps. Also look for high denomination stamps. It stands to reason if you've got, in Great Britain, if you've got a halfpenny stamp and you've got a £5 stamp, the £5 stamp's probably going to be worth more than the halfpenny stamp. Not necessarily, but probably. So look at your high value stamps and look at your old stamps first, and maybe get a value on those. If they turn out to be not much, then the rest of it's probably not much as well.
One thing I would like to add to that, if you said to the average person about stamps, let's say 30 people out of 100 may have heard of Stanley Gibbons. May have done.
It depends which country you're from, because Stanley Gibbons is popular in England, but in America it's Scots. Depends where you're from as to which catalogue. And in Europe they use Michel. It's quite a popular catalogue as well.
But not every town or city is going to have a shop that sells coins, stamps.
No, stamp shops are now
banknotes.
dying out because it's such an easy thing to do online. So my advice would be to go online and find a local dealer, a local club. There's lots of stamp clubs around, and approach them first, especially if you've got a big collection. You know, if you've got 15 albums, you don't want to be traipsing halfway around the world or halfway around the country with them to see if somebody wants to buy them. So go local first. Stamp collectors are honest people. If you've got something worth a lot of money, they will tell you. They won't try and rip you off in general.
Well, I think this has been absolutely fascinating, and I'm just trying to put myself into, like, you know, the average person who knows at some point they've got to attack that shoebox or that carrier bag in the loft. Is AI something worth doing? Have they got a stamp shop where they live? Do they know somebody who might know something about stamps?
Yeah. As I said, the trouble with AI is it really can only deal with one stamp at a time. And if you've got thousands, it's a long process. Whereas an experienced dealer can look at a collection and say, oh yeah, that's nothing, or that's a lot. You know, that's more interesting. But, and this is a small but nevertheless a but, the dealer is going to want something for his time to look at your collection. So that could be he might value it slightly lower, or it could be that he's going to charge you to value it first of all. Like everything, time is money. So if a dealer's spending time looking at your collection, he's really going to want something back for it. And I think this applies actually to all types of collections. You know, I'm thinking coins and money. People collect notes and coins. The same thing would really apply. I would imagine that AI can do a certain amount for you, but a whole collection is, you know, it's probably pros and cons with whether you use a dealer or whether you use AI.
Would you give the thumbs up to using AI?
As a tool, yes. As the be all and end all, no. You can't be human intervention, especially with stamps, because a valuable stamp has to be looked at physically, not just a picture, and AI can't do that.
Okay, brilliant. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. I think it's just interesting for me personally, and I hope for you as well, how AI is being used in people's lives, whether it's for a hobby, composing a letter you've got to write or whatever. It's just interesting to see how people are using AI. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation. So please subscribe for future episodes on whatever platform you are listening on. It is free. And please share this podcast. And if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com, and let's tell your story.